All right, everyone, we're back with another episode of the Announcer's Hour, and today we got a new special guest, and that is going to be Spencer McLaughlin, who's joining us as the voice of the Southern Utah Thunderbirds and everything in the Western Athletic Conference. So, Spencer, how are you doing today?
I'm doing phenomenally well. Always ready to talk broadcasting or just, talk in general.
Definitely. And can you explain that current role and kind of what things you all do in that?
Yeah, so I'm the primary play-by-play announcer for Southern Utah, and that includes doing play-by-play on ESPN Plus for football, soccer, volleyball, men's and women's basketball, softball, and gymnastics. And then I travel to the road football games and some select basketball games as well to provide radio play-by-play coverage when teams are on the road. But mostly I'm actually in Cedar City, where the school's located, and as you might expect, Southern Utah. So it's not too much travel for me in this specific role. And I know that there are a lot of people this time of year that are on the road every other week with a basketball team. And certainly I know what that's like from football season. But, being able to just kind of stay home a lot of the time and call a variety of sports is a really, really awesome opportunity.
For sure. And kind of, I know you do some stuff with Locked On, and so what's your role with that?
Yeah, so I host Locked On Ducks and Locked On College Football, which are daily podcasts Monday through Friday, all year round, Monday through Saturday during the season. Both of those shows are on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts as well. So I do those shows 365 days a year. I've done that for the last couple of years. I started with Locked On Ducks in mid-December 2021. I think December 17th, 2021 was my first show right around the time Dan Lanning got hired. And I've been doing that ever since then. And I took over what was then Locked On Pac-12, RIP, in April of 2022. And then when the Pac-12, imploded tragically, but it'll get rebuilt. But when that all went down, we switched the channel over to being Locked On College Football. So I do those two shows, 25 to 30-minute episodes, typically all year round, 5 days a week. That keeps me busy, and football season is definitely busy season, and basketball is a little bit calmer. And then once the play-by-play season ends, I am playing an outrageous amount of golf.
Nice. And by the way, with the Oregon Ducks, I mean, that's a huge program. And so how did you already like have a lot of familiarity with that by the time you got the offer to take over with the podcast hosting and stuff?
Yeah, I grew up in Oregon. I've been a Duck fan my entire life since I was 5 years old. So I grew up going to games at Autzen Stadium and some basketball games as well. But I mean, just always been a Duck fan. Always watched them as a kid, and kind of walking that line between I'm a fan having a show and I'm a media personality having a show has been. I wouldn't say challenging, just kind of interesting to feel out. Like what's the line? When do you want to, be more in one camp than the other? And I think it just kind of depends on the day. But I mean, the show's been doing well, and I'm very grateful to all the people that listen and follow along for that. But I'd say that there's a real realization that you hit when you do these daily shows that there are some people that just want to tune in and listen to what my take is, but also just listen to me, right? Like it's an Oregon-based podcast or a college football podcast and whatnot, but people, wanting to listen to me is like a strange thing to think about on the one hand, because it's very different from play-by-play where, they don't have a choice. They're tuning in to watch the team. They're not really, they have no control over, who's calling the game or what you say or all that sort of stuff, but they have to, right, like if you don't like Tom Brady as an announcer, you don't have a choice. You're gonna have to listen to him in the Super Bowl, but a podcast is someone making a choice, and so making that choice worthwhile, I think has been a big part of the success of the shows that I've had so far, but I'm always looking to get better and grow.
For sure. And do you remember what it was like when you first signed on with Southern Utah and kind of that entire process, like how that came about?
Yeah, so I was doing play-by-play at a junior college in Oklahoma at Eastern Oklahoma State, go Mountaineers, and I was enjoying it out there. I mean, I had a job out of college in broadcasting that was paid a full-time position. Like those are hard to come by. And I was getting a lot of reps, and that was the best part about that job. I mean, there were great people out there, and the games were super fun. Some of the teams, the women's team went to the NJCAA tournament, national tournament for the first time in 20 years or so, and that was super cool to be a part of and cover. And the whole journey, like when I got there, I thought I would be there for a couple of years, then maybe progress up to Division 2 or Division 3 NAI or something like that. And then after just one season in Wilburton, Oklahoma, I got an opportunity through a friend from my hometown back in Oregon that, said, "Hey, we might have an opportunity for you to come call games out here." And he was at SUU, and he got there because he worked as a graduate assistant at St. Mary's under who is now the Southern Utah women's head basketball coach, and then was director of ops, and then came in to be her director of ops and got promoted to assistant. And so that it is not uncommon that you hear about an opportunity because somebody that says, "Hey, this job's open. Would you be interested?" And of course I was interested. And then, the process just kind of rolled along, and then we eventually made it happen. They actually said no at first. I, made a proposal essentially because they didn't have a formal position listed. It was a really adaptive time in broadcasting because ESPN Plus was rolling out all of their coverage, and so they just announced their media rights partnership with the Big Sky, which Southern Utah was in at the time, but they were going to go to the WAC, but then the WAC announced the same deal. And so when I first contacted them to see if there was an opportunity, they said, "No, we can't do that right now, but next year when we're setting the budget, I think we can." And I thought, okay, great. So I'll be here in Oklahoma again for another year. I like it out here. Job's going well. Like I live by myself. Like it's all good. And then they called a couple months later and said, after the media deal got announced, "Hey, can you come and just, help? Can you call these sports and be on call to help out with all the other sports?" And that all came about in less than 48 hours. When I woke up on a Monday morning, early August 2021, I thought I'm going to be in Oklahoma for another sports season. And that's great. I enjoyed my first year. There were a lot of exciting teams going into the next year and everything like that. And then by Wednesday afternoon, I told my boss that I was submitting my 2 weeks. So it can move quickly, and it certainly did for me. But I've loved it at SCU ever since I got here, and I'm in my fourth season now, and I could not love it anymore.
Definitely. And I feel like, one big thing that you mentioned is just kind of like the entire process wasn't really like a posted position. That's just one thing I've noticed from having on like a lot of announcers at this point is that a lot of guys, like if you're searching, if you're like a broadcaster out there and searching for a job, it does seem like a lot of times it's just not even like posted. You almost just have to be in that inner circle and knowing the people to get that opportunity from what I've been able to hear from and all the stories so far. And then going back to your time, obviously a little bit in Oklahoma. I mean, what was that first like when you first landed there at a college and kind of what did you learn in getting all those repetitions?
Yeah, I think there was an element of culture shock for someone who grew up in a Portland, Oregon suburb my entire life and went to college in Northern California, just outside of San Jose. You go to a town of 2,800 people in southeast Oklahoma, a lot of things are different. And I loved it. I'm so glad that I had that experience for a variety of reasons, but that's definitely one of the things that stood out is you just meet different sorts of people and interact with folks in ways maybe you wouldn't have before just because yeah, it's just a different state. It's in the same country, but I mean it's essentially a different country out there, just in that people don't operate on the same wavelength of humor, for instance. Like it's just very different. And I love that experience. I love the people out there. They were hilarious and awesome and really just great, really nice, down to earth people to be around. But in calling games, the biggest thing that I learned is you're never going to stop getting better. no matter how many games I could not tell you the number of games that I called out there. Every basketball game day throughout the season was a doubleheader. So I was doing 4 games a week during basketball season. And then softball was usually a doubleheader, and baseball often a doubleheader. And we covered high school football, we covered high school basketball. And one thing I definitely learned retroactively now that I've spent the last few years at Southern Utah is how appreciative we should all be of sports information directors at the college or professional level. They are making our lives so much easier, and that should always be appreciated because finding your own stats, tidbits, information, it can be tedious, it can be time consuming as well. And the work that SIDs do is really to be appreciated at all times. But just the biggest thing I got out there was just the opportunity to call a lot of games. Just call a lot of games, get better, work in just the subtlest of changes to your broadcasts, whether that's new vocab words or different tempo, different pacing, letting it breathe more. Like I could go on and on, but I went into that job. I graduated from Santa Clara in the class of 2020 and was an STAA All-American, but I went into that job a far worse announcer than when I came out of it because of all the games that I got to call. And I didn't just call them. I'd make sure that I had recordings of those games. I would go back and listen over and over and over again. Something that I still do, not as often as I used to, quite frankly, but there was so much learning in that time for me because I had a lot of time on my hands. I didn't wasn't near a major metropolitan area, and there was COVID as well, so I wasn't doing a ton of traveling or anything. Mostly, I would play golf, work, and uh, try to make myself better as an announcer and play some video games as well. And that was really it. And I really enjoyed that. But that commitment to just being better all the time is one of the things that would get me excited for any game is, hey, I heard myself doing this. I don't want to do that again. Go through an entire game, don't make that mistake. Or man, I didn't vary my vocab enough. Let's be better with that. Let's figure out how I can improve. And leaning on people that I knew as well was a really important thing uh to get better because you can listen to yourself and you can improve. You need fresh ears. You need someone to listen to you for the first time because you can just get tunnel vision or tunnel listenership to your own broadcast. And so I think that's what I got out of it the most is I was doing radio play-by-play, a little bit of just TV play-by-play, some sports talk as well. Like those reps were so invaluable for me that, by the time I got to Southern Utah, I had an entire demo reel of stuff that had been that I had been called that wasn't from my time as a college student, and that's one of the reasons that the SID who hired me said that he wanted to bring me aboard.
For sure. And I know like getting that repetition, the experience can't be undervalued. But I am wondering, now that you're at Southern Utah and you were in that position and prior, what was kind of the average week like when you were in Oklahoma? And then what was the average week like at Southern Utah? Let's say like if you have a basketball game and a football game in the same week.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Just because every week is so different. There's definitely a rhythm to basketball season once you get into conference play. I was actually just prepping for my game on Thursday earlier this week because I'm going out of town with my family this weekend, just for a little quick trip down to Vegas, and so I wanted to get ahead on a bunch of work so I can be ready for that. But a typical week for me in Oklahoma when I knew I had 2 basketball games on Thursday. I didn't do any work on Sunday. That's different now because I record my podcast the day before. So my work week is typically Sunday through Thursday, but that's with the shows. So I'll get to that in a sec. But back in Oklahoma, it was Monday through Saturday were days where work transpired. There weren't really ever games to call or anything to do on Sundays, and Sundays were just there's nothing to do. But then Monday morning, I'd go in and there were other things I had to do at the radio station, some weather updates and my morning radio show as well, where I was just doing kind of fun entertainment segments about variety or about various things for a few hours. So I'd pop in and do those, and then go back to my desk. And when I'm at my desk, I'm getting ready for the game because every week I'm putting together a board for a new team, updating my boards from the prior week, and so that was really what Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday entailed, was just kind of getting ready for that, having all the information because I had two games that day. And then on Thursday, it was going through last minute details, still doing the radio show in the morning. And then in the evening, call both games back to back, go home and get up the next day on Friday and go to the office and same thing, radio show in the morning. So I'm just kind of popping in and out of the studio a couple times per hour, doing some weather updates, other things around the office while just sitting on my desk and just prepping all the time. It was just kind of constant prep. And, that's because doubleheaders are a lot to call. And when you're doing those games on radio, you got to know those names like that. So, you can't have any hesitation for the men's or women's games with, names of players. You can't be, relying on your boards to get a name or buy time or anything like that. You have to be instantaneous with that sort of stuff. So I spent a lot of time doing that. That was, basketball season typically, but then, in the fall there was high school football. That was a big part of our coverage. But I mean, one football game's about the equivalent of two basketball games of prep because you have so many more players to put onto your boards. And so that always took a while as well. But that was kind of the cycle, was Monday through Saturday typically were work days with various tasks and duties. And now it's different where I've got the shows that I record Sunday through Thursday because they air Monday through Friday, and I schedule them to go out. But when I record those shows depends. In the off season in particular, I tend to wait until later at night because you don't know what news is going to come in during the day. If I want to or if I need to, I could wake up and record my shows at 8 and 9 in the morning, and there'd be no problem with that. But would that really be wise? Probably not, because you don't know. Most news comes, kind of after the workday. I mean, Oregon has had, players commit after 9 o'clock my time, PM. And I don't know what their thinking is with that or why they need to announce it there. But that has to be in my show the following day. So my mornings are typically pretty lax, but then evenings are usually when I do a lot more work. So, like this time of year when I play golf in the morning, and then I come back, and in the evening, then I get to work. I start looking for stories or segments, ideas, and then once I kind of figure out what I want my rundown to be, and maybe I have an idea from the prior day where I'm reaching out to a guest, another Locked On host, or somebody I know, like, hey, can I get your first segment on this? And then work that into my day as well. Like I was just texting our ACC guys because the schedule is coming out today, and I want to do a segment on that once the schedule comes out. And so figuring out, like, hey, what time can we do this? When are we recording? That's always very fluid. But typically, Sunday through Thursday are the work days, but then we rarely have broadcasts on Fridays. Every now and then a basketball game or a gymnastics meet will be on a Friday, but typically, in hoop season, it's Thursday, Saturday. So I've got a game to call on Thursday, which I've already got my prep done for, and then I'm going to pre-prep my board so that I don't have as much work to do on Friday. But, this time of year, basically doing some amount of work 7 days a week, typically. One's play-by-play ends in the end of April when softball wraps up for Southern Utah. Then it'll be a lighter workload for me. And I know a lot of people have, summer play-by-play internships or gigs or, wood bat leagues and all that sort of stuff. That's something that had I known I was going to do this back in college, I probably would have done. But I actually didn't know I was going to do this till my senior year. And so, that same schedule sits there for the shows. And, it's kind of like being in college in that, once school gets out, feels like summer because it's just not nearly as much, but then it ramps back up during football season. So that was a long-winded explanation, I know, to your question, but the week to week, day to day, follows the same kind of model of the industry writ large from what I've been able to gather, which is nothing, there's nothing normal, nothing is the same all the time. It's just you just figure it out. You just figure out what do I need to do that day? How are we going to get it done? Figure out what you need to do. Then once you get that done, what's next?
100%. And definitely, spoke about baseball. I should say it's funny. I have the Quincy Gems 2023. Last year they were known as that in the Prospect League, and they're coming back for this season. But I'm speaking about that because I'm wondering, how much baseball have you done? I don't think Southern Utah has a baseball team. And then secondly, would you consider doing minor league baseball or trying to basically excel in that sport?
Yeah, I've done a fair amount of baseball, not a ton, but actually all the baseball that I've called, I'm pretty sure came while I was in Oklahoma. We had local high school baseball coverage, and we also had a baseball team at Eastern that we covered, the home games on Mountaineer TV for, and we travel every now and then when they'd have postseason tournaments as well. Like we did the Region Two, NJCAA Region Two round robin championship, essentially. Where you play three teams, double elimination. Winner goes on to um, Grand Junction, I believe, in Colorado is where the NJCAA World Series is. So, getting to call that was really, really cool. And there were some really, really good players in that series. Guys who are in the major leagues right now, bouncing around. I'm a big Mariners fan. You can see the Griffey frame right there. A buddy of mine got that for me, and there were our Locked On Mariners hosts were discussing the prospect of a trade with the Red Sox because there, could be a potential match there. And one of the guys they talked about potentially trading for, just as like a piece in the package, was David Sandlin, who was at Oklahoma and was at Eastern before that. And I called his games while he was there. And I went, "Wait, that David Sandlin?" I looked up, I was like, "Yeah, same guy." And that's the minimal relative to what I know about baseball coverage that I've had of that sport in my time. Done a lot of softball because SU does have softball, but you're right, we don't have baseball. And like I love baseball. I really do. I don't know that the minor league baseball schedule aligns with what my schedule is. It could, but the amount of time spent on the road, with the schedule overlap and what I need to do the podcasts or to do both podcasts, which is I can do them from anywhere, but you've got to have a good internet connection. And if you don't, then it makes it really challenging. So I don't think that is something that aligns. It doesn't mean I would never accept an opportunity if it came about, but frankly, I haven't called a baseball game in so long. I don't know that I'd be able to get an interview for a minor league baseball job. Like, yeah, I've called a bunch of softball and I know a bunch of baseball and I have called baseball before, but they probably want someone who has more recent experience. So, I love college athletics, and that's where I would like to stay is, keep progressing up the ranks at the collegiate level because I think college sports are second to none. And I love high school sports. I watch, follow, and root very hard for professional sports as well. But of the three levels, give me college sports every day of the week and twice on Saturday.
Nice, and that's a good thing I think to fall. But also on that you've gotten into kind of more TV broadcasts from jumping to your time to Oklahoma and Southern Utah. Can you take us kind of through what do you have like a ton of prep with the crew? Because I think it all depends what game you're going to do and kind of what's that like and how many people do you have to really be working with for that?
Yeah, so that's something we've actually expanded, this year at Southern Utah, and something that I'm extremely proud of what we've been able to do because I always want to elevate everything, whether that's myself as an announcer, my shows, I mean, to stuff as little as the background that I have here. Like this is the office where I do my podcast from. And when I first, started in here, I had the desk in a different spot. But then over time realized there's a lot of open space behind me. You want to condense that down in a podcast format. You don't want to have blank walls as often. So I found some things like, these two things were in my bedroom. My buddy got me that for Christmas. I saw that on a friend's set and thought, oh, that'd be great to have. I have a flag I hang on the door here. Like that's just kind of how I'm wired. Is just always, I think it's because I'm a golfer, frankly. It's how I was raised as well, but golfers are in constant progression mode. No matter how good you get, pro golfers are trying to get better. And that's the way you should approach any broadcast entity that you go to. How can we make it better? So, for example, for Southern Utah this year, for our ESPN Plus broadcasts, for football and basketball, there are a couple of significant elements that we've been able to work in this year that have, I think, elevated us and helped us project or just give people a better broadcast than several other schools in the league. There are other ones that do a good job and have these elements too, but just going back to what I'm talking about, just constantly elevate, just stay in a growth mindset forever and find ways to improve. We have worked in a sideline reporter for our college football broadcast, which is huge, which include live interviews with coaches during the game. We did not have that in my first 3 years here. We have worked in live stats to the broadcast as well. We've added a starting lineup graphic for basketball games that include headshots of players once they get into conference play because they're sent out from the league. And our graphics guy Brig has just been doing an amazing job with all of that and increasing the number of graphics we can use in a broadcast. So before, I go to a Southern Utah basketball game like I will on Thursday, before I go down to, get everything set up courtside, I'm there typically an hour before the game. Sometimes more, sometimes less if I'm running behind. But I like to be there an hour before because that gives me more than enough time to go check in and say, hey, what graphics do we have? Where are we going to use them? And I mean, we've gotten into a rhythm now where we know, hey, we're putting this here and this here. And they've worked a highlight reel package into the halftime show as well, where, we come back from break. I do a live read for ESPN Plus as required. And then we go straight into a highlight package for whoever the leading scorer in the game is, whichever side of the game they're playing on. And that's the sort of thing that legitimately excites me, even though I'm not putting that together. Obviously, I'm a part of it because I'm setting up my color guy to talk while the highlights are going on and we're discussing, all that sort of stuff. But I mean, that's just a higher level element to a broadcast that a lot of people don't think about when they just watch college basketball. But you have to realize how many people are involved with that. You have to have a graphics guy that can load up the player or girl that can load up the player into the software, roll it at the right time, wipe it away at the right time, and then have the highlights package roll. Well, that comes from whoever's running the replay, who has to be, clipping this player and that player and getting all that sort of stuff. And, these are college students that we're working with, but they're doing a really, really good job of incorporating these elements. So, I'll go into the production room before the game and we'll just get a rundown. I actually just told them on Saturday, like we're in a nice routine now, aren't we? Where everything we know what it's going to be, but over the course of time, we've tinkered with this, that, and the other thing, and it could be a small thing, such as when I'm doing a live read or when I'm doing the live read to promote the ESPN Plus package that they have on there, that's a required part of it. Don't put me on camera because I'm not reading that off of memory. I'm reading that off of, it has to be this exact verbiage and they don't want it to be different than that. So I'm going to read that off of, a screenshot that I have on my phone. Well, when we first did that, they came to me on camera while I was reading it. Well, that doesn't look very good, right? And so those are the sorts of adjustments that's just one example that we've made over time. Like, hey, make sure that this is clean. Make sure we toss here. We're out by this time. Then I will also run through once we do halftime and post game stuff. I'll run through with our graphics guy, my director, what we want to do right when the broadcast begins. Now we don't have time to be on camera when the broadcast starts because we're down on the court, which is fine because being down on the court is better than being up above as we had been. But that's another thing that incorporates another that can throw a wrinkle into things. And so we will discuss, hey, I want to highlight this storyline for this game, and I want to highlight this player. So have a graphic ready for this player. Like on Saturday, California Baptist was playing Southern Utah. Leading scorer in the WAC is on CBU. His name's Dom Daniels. And so to begin the broadcast, I'm setting the stage first. Welcome to Cedar City. Spencer McLaughlin, Dallin Richards with you here on ESPN, all that sort of stuff. and then I tee him up for a big picture talking point, and then we get into a player highlight or two, and then our graphics guy Brig knows once we start talking about Dom Daniels, boom, he throws up the Dom Daniels graphic that has a picture of him, name, number, and some of the key stats, and then he will flash me the graphic in our pregame meeting and say, hey, which stats do you want on here? Because he can put up to three. So those are the sorts of production elements that are very brief. Like that whole sequence is 30 seconds maybe on the broadcast, but it takes a lot of time. I have to be prepared for the game, which takes several hours. Our graphics guy has to have every single person loaded in because he doesn't know. He has an idea perhaps, but I might call for someone else or say, hey, I want to have, a graphic for this. Can you get that made? And just thinking about all those details and all those little moments and whatnot throughout requires constant ongoing communication. And that's something that applies to podcasts as well. When you're doing shows the way I am, and this would apply if you had a daily radio show as well, you should be constantly preparing. Not that you're sitting around and nonstop refreshing Twitter, getting news and texting people, but there should never be a time of day where you're opposed to hearing something that is newsworthy. You never know when that's going to pop up or when you might hear about it. I could be on the golf course, someone say, "Hey, did you see that this coordinator went there?" Wait, what? He actually went there? Yeah, he went there. And then I can look into that, ask a guy, hey, can we get on and do a segment about this later tonight? So constant preparation, constant improvement, I think are really, really important things. And when you're doing a television broadcast, you need to know what graphics you have, what live reads you have to do, which breaks you have to get in and out of, and all those technical elements to make sure that it runs smoothly.
Okay, well, we are back after the short transition. And Spencer, I wanted to kind of before we obviously went right into Southern Utah and like everything with that you've had going on and great detail on the production side. 'Cause I think a lot of people, like you mentioned, kind of watch it, don't necessarily know what's going on in the backdrop. But, going way back, like, was there any announcers that you looked up to? And when was the moment maybe you thought you wanted to get into play-by-play in college?
Oh man. I just have such a long list of play-by-play announcers who I think are great. I always go back to Joe Davis is I think the best in the country right now, in terms of all around versatility and just high level play-by-play storytelling. I mean, he does everything well. Literally everything well. So he's certainly up there in the baseball world. My guy Aaron Goldsmith with the Mariners. I love listening to Goldie nonstop. Have always been a big fan of Goldie. His vocab is to be emulated by all. The way that he varies and comes up with appropriately awesome terms to describe a hard hit ball or a home run. Literally, my brother and a friend of ours is a Mariners fan. We talk about the team all year round. When there is a home run that the Mariners hit, we and one of us or two of us aren't watching, but one or two of us are. That those that are watching will send what word he used, for like whenever the Mariners hit their first home run of the season, which will probably be in like the middle of May. Whenever they actually do that, I guarantee you one of us will text the other what word Goldie used because his vocab is that good. And so he's a guy that is great. Kevin Harlan is electric. Ian Eagle is really good. I do like Joe Buck. He's not my favorite, but I do like him, and he does a lot of things well. Jim Nantz on golf, there's nobody better. Spiro Dedes, another guy nationally that pops into my head. I grew up listening to Jerry Allen, the voice of the Oregon Ducks, and Dave Niehaus, the radio voice of the Mariners, until he passed away in 2011, 2010 or 11, unfortunately. But, Rick Riz, another Mariners announcer, radio guy for a long time. Those are guys that have grown up and, from afar. Like I haven't met any of those guys before, but they have been huge influences on me on this is good. This is what proper play-by-play announcing really sounds like. And, I have had some great announcers who I've met in person and stayed in touch with over the years, like Ken Korak of the Oakland A's, whose voice you can hear in the movie Moneyball, which for my money is the best sports movie ever made. and he is phenomenal, always has been, and I've enjoyed listening to him for a long time. And even before I kind of realized it, watching that movie or hearing clips from the A's over the years, always thought Ken was really good. I mean, there are so many. Mike Breen, can't believe I went that long and didn't say Mike Breen in the NBA. Like he and Harlan to me are the gold standard for NBA play-by-play. But I've met Ken before and have kept in touch with him. John Strong, voice of the MLS on Fox, another guy that I've had the privilege of knowing and has been a great mentor to me in my career and is a phenomenal announcer himself. I think he and Stu on soccer are just absolutely outstanding. But as for when I decided, and I didn't even list every announcer that I think is good in there, but those are certainly among my favorites. When I decided, I actually didn't go to college thinking I'd do broadcasting as my primary career. I thought it would be maybe like a hobby because I'd done it in high school, but it was a hobby, and I never had anyone tell me, that I could make it a career or how I make it a career or anything like that. So that was an eye-opening experience when I got to college and started doing games. I again still thought it would be a hobby after the first 2 years, and then I was in line to be the sports director of the student radio station my senior year. And then that summer before my senior year of college, I got an internship at Root Sports, and that's the flagship TV station of the Seattle Mariners. And so I was interning there, and I was suddenly around people who I had watched on TV my whole life, but I was around them in person and kind of, realized, oh yeah, that's right. They're just real normal people. They have husbands, wives, kids, job, like all that sort of stuff. And, going into work every day and having Angie Mentink call me over to her desk so that I could do her a favor, or Jen Mueller wants me to transcribe an interview she did with someone, whatever it was. Every one of those moments led me towards this is way more attainable than I thought. And there are way more jobs that are not on the air than I originally thought. That, if you get one of those early in your career and find other opportunities to do play by play, you can form connections and then try to get a play by play opportunity. Like it's, I know that there are a lot of announcers out there who started as a production assistant or an intern here, or not being the on-air talent, and then eventually finding a chance here or there, getting the demo tape in front of the right person and making it happen. But I hadn't even been working at Root for 2 weeks before I just decided on my own. I didn't ask anybody, talk to my parents. I just told them eventually, like, I'm doing this. This is the greatest. I am around sports every day. Work was going to the Mariners ballpark. That's what I used to call a vacation of sorts that I do a few times a year. And, going to the ballpark every now and then for work, or just being around the Mariners games, which I was going to watch anyway, but then getting paid to do it and being a part of those telecasts was just, however small the role was eye-opening to how attainable the career actually is. I don't want to mislead people into thinking that it's really easy to find a great setup that is consistent and pays you well or anything like that. It's definitely not, but I had been there for about 10 days and decided I cannot pass up this chance if I really do have this opportunity. And then when I went back to college, I just called as many games as I possibly could, got better, and then once the my graduation time rolled around, I made it so that I could graduate a quarter early, which would line up with certain play-by-play jobs better, like minor league baseball, for instance. And that was actually really beneficial because Santa Clara, where I went to school, is on the quarter system. That ends in June, and my job at Eastern Oklahoma State began in April. So if I had not been a college graduate in March, I wouldn't have been able to get my first job, and who knows what would have happened after that. So it all just kind of worked out, but it came together very, very quickly, and it's easily the best decision I ever made.
Right. When you were in college and transitioning into sports, what were the first few games do you remember calling there, and kind of what were the big learning steps in that process
Ooh.
as far as getting better as an announcer?
Well, the biggest thing for kids in college, and one thing I've done at Southern Utah the last couple of years since it started, is help teach a broadcasting class that they have as a part of their sports communication major. One thing I tell those students a lot is you have to get as many opportunities to be on air as you can. After I gave a lecture last week, a kid walking out of class came up and said, "Hey, did you ever have nerves when you went on the air, when you first started in college?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And nobody was really listening except for my family, maybe a couple other people. But I mean, it was the student radio station. Like it wasn't like we had hundreds or thousands of people that were listening. Like the most people that were tuned in at any given moment when I was calling a game in college, I can't imagine there was ever a time where it was more than 20, and it was usually less than 10. But I didn't care because it was just fun to be there. If one person was listening, it was just a really cool place uh, to be mentally. Just like I'm the person that gets to communicate this to other people, and this is awesome, and it was awesome, and it still is, and I don't lose sight of that. But I started as a studio guy because that's where everyone kind of started at the student radio program that we had because it was just an opportunity to get on the air, and that's before I got sidetracked there, which I do a lot. I tell those students all the time, you have to just get on the air. Yes, it is nerve-wracking to talk in front of a microphone, just like it is nerve-wracking to talk in front of people or on a camera or with a light in your face. Obviously, I'm used to all that stuff now, but I wasn't always. I wasn't always, and there's nothing that can replace reps. So whether you're doing color commentary for a sport you barely understand, learn about the sport, understand how to talk about it, talk to people who know how to talk about it, and figure out what you can say on the air. Or play-by-play for a high school game where, we called a high school football game once when I was in college, and we weren't able to get set up in the press box. So we were in the bleachers, set up, calling the game, and the PA speaker was right behind me and a couple feet above. And it was so obnoxious and so terrible. But being able to battle through something like that and just getting the opportunity to talk on the air, knowing how to be comfortable, how to work off a partner, how to incorporate a third member of the broadcast, how to toss the break, how to come back from break and stick to your fundamentals and still get better and work in your vocab and everything like that. There's no replacement. There is no quick fix. Some people pick it up faster than others, no doubt. But I am so much better now than I was when I graduated college, when I first started in college, when I first did games in high school. It's not even close. And it's just because I've had the reps. You have to be willing to put in the time. And if you are, then you can do it. Anybody can. But you have to be, not everybody has that mental fortitude to hunker down and get really good at it. You muted yourself.
Sorry,
There you go.
I muted myself. But were there any opportunities that you had to kind of really work through just to get that opportunity to be on air? Like, you mentioned, for example, working at Root and everything and all the experience that was and getting experience behind the camera, the microphone. But at college, like, because I know a lot of young broadcasters might be listening, looking for those opportunities. Did you have to do a ton of like production work or studio hosting and stuff like that to get that first play-by-play thing?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't personally, and that's just because it worked out that way at Santa Clara and KSCU, and the student broadcast program has grown and flourished since then. I've had a hand, along with others, in assuring that that's the case because it was so beneficial for me. I want other people to understand what it can do for them. Um, I didn't go straight to even doing color commentary when I first got involved calling Santa Clara games. Like I mentioned earlier, I was doing, board op and studio host, which is limited talking, but mostly, making sure the play-by-play announcer is on the air and off the air at the right time. And we had a whole system that was kind of jerry-rigged, but it certainly worked and still does to this day for how you get on and off the air for everyone and get in and out of PSA reads instead of commercial breaks because it's a non-commercial station. But I started there. I would go on, my buddy had a talk show. I would go on and be a guest. And I'm not paid anything to do that. He wasn't paid anything to host the show. But what we were doing is just building a level of confidence and understanding of how to talk, how to carry a conversation, how to project properly, how to have preparation, how to work that in, how to be funny, how to have personality, how to do all of those things. And there was an element of, working my way up, but frankly, it was a lot shorter than it would have been for me if I had been at, a school like Syracuse or Arizona State or Missouri. I mean, I talk to kids that have gone to schools like that, and they say, "Yeah, I'm calling like 2 games this semester." Like, really? Well, yeah, there are a lot of students, and it's because they have a real structured school-sponsored program there, which is great. There are a lot of benefits to that. You learn a lot. You do not get as many reps. You just flat out do not get as many reps because there are other kids that are doing it and they're in the broadcasting school and everyone's going to get an opportunity there. So you don't get the same chance to build demo reel, but there are certainly a lot of connections that you make at a school like ASU or Syracuse that you don't make if you're at, kind of a boots on the ground operation that we had and still kind of have going at KSCU at Santa Clara. So I think that you have to find whatever it is, guest on a talk show, color commentary for this sport, board op and studio hosting, play by play for a sport you don't know that well. Like you just have to take it. You just have to go. You never know who's listening. You never know who you're going to meet, but you just have to keep on getting reps. There is no substitute or fast track for that. And that's one of the reasons I'm grateful that, there isn't or wasn't a school sponsored program the way that you have at some of these big spots. I mean, I knew a kid who went to a school back east that had one, and he said, "Yeah, I'm doing 1 game this month." I was like, "That's it?" Yeah, well, that's all the opportunity. And if you're in that position, you got to reach out to local high schools and say, "Hey, what's your broadcasting setup? I'd like an opportunity to call games," because you cannot seriously progress as an announcer if you're calling 2 games a semester or 1 game a month. That's just not enough. It's not even close to enough. So that's something I'd encourage anyone listening to or watching this that wants to get in the sports broadcasting space to consider is find every nook and cranny of an opportunity to call games and call them. And, I called a game in high school once, to this day, most exhausted I've ever been after a broadcast. It was a local high school basketball game. I was doing it for this local company that, sold some sponsorships, but I wasn't paid. The guy was doing it and I just wanted the opportunity. And that's the other thing. Don't be seeking money when you're in college. That is no, don't do that because they will find someone like me or many others that will go and call the high school game for free. Do not do not expect to get any money there. You are looking for opportunities and exposure. Those are the two things. And what networking comes with that exposure and whatnot. But this game I was calling, it was a YouTube stream, but it was audio only, and the ads were running, the whole time, like on screen while the game was going. But there were also live reads we had to do during commercial breaks. I did this game by myself. I did not have a color commentator. I did not have a studio host. I did not have a board op, nothing. I just ran the broadcast and it was just me. And I had to talk, I had to do the whole game radio play by play, which is about the most talking that you can do because of the ferocious action and there aren't really that many lulls. And I also had to talk during the ad breaks because I had to do the actual live reads. So I was quite literally talking nonstop for about 3 hours, about 2.5 to 3 hours, somewhere in that range, nonstop. I did not have a color analyst. I did not have anyone to tap me out. It was just me for that long. But that experience, easily one of the most memorable in the best way, because if you can do that, what can't you do?
Right. I mean, that is really tough. That's where it's always difficult. I've had broadcasts up here where I'm at in North Dakota where sometimes I get the load off of somebody else in the studio that is capable of handling the, halftime show or something, which gives you a chance to like catch your breath. But definitely that is an experience in doing that consecutively. And I'll just the most I ever did like something like that was I did 4 football games in one day at Dakota Bowl.
Oof.
And but
But
that
that's
was
great. That's great because when you have an experience like that in your memory and you know you can do that, other things just don't seem as hard.
right. But and that's the point I was making is like once you get through that, I'm always gonna look back on that day and be like, even if I'm calling bigger games or accomplish goals, I'm like, the biggest sprint that I think I've ever done in one day broadcasting. And, on more of the technical side with that, like with color commentators, I think this is another big topic. A lot of like broadcasts are always trying to figure out is how do you integrate the color commentator really well on sports? And then what's the difference between you doing that like on radio and a TV broadcast?
Ooh, that's a long answer, but I'll try and condense this down as much as I can. So you need to have a clearly defined set of rules with whoever your color commentator is. And I make this clear when I lecture in class. I make this clear to anyone that calls a game with me. There is a time for me to talk, and there is a time for you to talk. And those two times should never intersect. And this goes both ways. This is just not me wanting to be the star and telling everyone to shut up and let me talk and all not and whatnot. Although I do say that to Tom Brady sometimes out loud, like Tom, just save it, man, save it. But it goes both ways because I've actually had a couple problems with it that I've caught myself with this year where I'm talking when a color commentator should, or I'm saying too much. You need to both understand going into any broadcast what your roles are and when each is supposed to speak. So if you have a TV broadcast, when the action is happening, that's typically play by play. After the action, when there are lulls, that can be either one, depending on the flow. You got to feel those sorts of things out. You can't fake chemistry. I don't care who you are calling a game with. It could be your brother who you've grown up with and been super tight with. You cannot fake chemistry and timing. That those sorts of things also like, getting good just come over time. You just have to get reps and get used to it in there. But when it's a late game sequence and it's a close matchup, that color commentator better not be talking. Conversely, if it's the middle of the second quarter and the play-by-play announcer says, knocks it down and that's a 7-point lead, don't be afraid to just let it go. And if the color commentator jumps in, no reason, no reason for me to cut him off, even if there's a made basket. If it's the middle of the second quarter, doesn't matter what the score is, right? If he's making a point, boy, that's another, just as an example, that's another instance of their inability to defend the pick and roll. It's nothing complicated, but they're setting the screen way up high, and there's just no help on the backside. It's three times now on the last few possessions that they haven't been able to make a defensive adjustment there. I wonder if coach is going to call a timeout. If in the moment where he starts talking about the pick and roll, a shot gets put up and I cut him off to say, oh, he puts up the shot, but he misses, he should scream at me because there's no reason for that, right? You can see what is happening there. Now that's on TV. When you are on radio, however, there is never an acceptable time to miss a made basket. The window or the green zone, as I call it, for a color commentator when you are on radio for basketball is in between the two 3-point lines. Once the ball is in that space, you can be talking. But if the ball is inside the arc at any time, you should not be talking. For basketball, it's different for every sport. For football, color commentator has to give you the opportunity to give down distance yard line every single play. If they break the huddle or if they're playing with tempo, you got to read it out because every single play, I should be telling the audience that's listening, down distance yard line, who has the ball. Now, formation is also really important, but not the end of the world if you don't have formation on every single play, but you should have it on most plays. So there's a huge difference there. And on radio, when you have a color commentator, it's also tricky because you have to figure out how to allow him to have a chance to come on because you don't have as much time. You also have to feel things out, right? I mean, you do games on radio, right? Yeah, you muted, but that's okay. You're shaking your head saying
I
yes.
guess, yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Yes.
so when have you called a game on basketball before?
Yeah.
Okay, quiz time. After every made basket, what should you do?
Give out that score.
Give out the time and score, full
Right.
time and score after every single made basket. I have to find a way to get that in while also allowing the opportunity for my analyst to have a chance to comment on what he is seeing. Now he's got to send it back to me in a reasonable amount of time. But I have to give him that opportunity. I can't lollygag. I need to be a word economist and give him a chance, or else I'm not doing my job correctly, right? Because
Yeah.
if I don't give him a chance, well, then I'm just making the whole thing about me. But there's also a feel for it. If a team makes a basket, you say knocks it down, that stretches the lead to 7:42:35 with 16:40 to go, and you see them quickly inbound and sprint up the court, you don't give your analyst a chance to jump in because you can't miss the action on the radio. But on TV, when you can see it, different dynamic. So when you're working, I don't even remember what your original question was, but when you're working with analysts like that, you need to have clearly defined roles and times for when each person is supposed to speak. Because when you talk over one another, or if you're stepping on each other's toes, it sounds horrible.
Right. And by the way, apologies on I've been on and off muting because I've been at the station, so I figured there could be like a background noise or somebody asking me something. And but so far I've been good. And secondly, off the color commentary point, because that's such a big challenge that I've definitely have figuring out how much to integrate them, like on the radio and then the television. I know it's a little bit easier to kind of let them speak, but it's still a constant challenge all the time, especially when you're working with new
Yeah.
people. And you
Well,
know,
and another thing, I I I I mentioned earlier that you want to take any opportunity you can. I did color before I did play by play. Very natural progression. It's like being an offensive coordinator before you're a head coach. Learn to be the number two before you're going to be the number one. You learn up close and personal what it's like to be the number one and perhaps see what you like and don't like sitting in that color commentator's chair so you know when you're on the other side of that microphone, you know, hey, don't do this because I know that this is not good or that this is annoying. Perfect example. And he'll have no problem with me telling this story. My good friend and mentor, who is the reason I'm a broadcaster, Jack Benjamin, who's the voice of Nicholls State and does a bunch of other stuff as well for Tulane and NBC. And like, he's awesome. And I'm incredibly lucky to have learned from him. When I first started doing color commentary games with him, I was a sophomore in college at Santa Clara. He was a senior. Routinely during a media timeout, we're calling the game on the radio and we're on break. And he would ask me, hey, what do you want to hit coming out of this? Which is still how I ask my analyst that question, just as an homage to Jack. But he would routinely ask me, hey, what do you want coming out of this? And I'd say, I want to hit Santa Clara's offense. They're one for the last seven. No, I think I think we should hit the Pacific defense, you know, in the way that they're playing and the way that they're forcing turnovers. And I'm like, okay, what the hell did you ask me for then? Just say that. Like that's fine. But what are you asking me for? Just so you could say no, like that always bugged the crap out of me. You know, I still love doing the games with him, but like that always really annoyed me. So when I ask my analyst, whoever it is, what do you want here? Whatever response I get, that's what we go with because that is the analyst's job, right? For the play by play announcer, it's more about what's happening. The analyst, it's more about why or how it's happening. And so that's the way that you should view a game when you're sitting in the color commentator's chair more than when you're in play by play. Not that you aren't watching what happens or thinking about why, but that is one of those role distinctions where I should not step over our my color commentator and say, "No, nah, I don't think we should talk about that." Like that's not my job. My job is ask him, "What are you seeing? What do you want here?" and then be willing to work with that.
right. And last couple of questions to kind of not take up too much of your time. I was wondering, do you have outside of the YouTube high school crazy dramatic 3 hour sprint thing, was there any other crazy games that stuck out for you, like in your memory, that really challenged you as a broadcaster?
Hmm, that really challenged me as a broad. Well, I think any high school game is actually pretty tough because you don't have reliable sports information. You don't have reliable rosters all the time. You certainly don't have stats. You don't have consistent heights. You have to consistently find things to talk about that are about the game. And that's really good experience because if you can do that, it suddenly becomes easier when you get to the college level and you have sports information directors that are putting together thick packets of game notes that you can lean on for tidbits and, time fillers or things to talk about at the free throw line or what have you. And, there was a game I did when I first got down here to Utah down in St. George. I called 2 games in a row, boys high school basketball, and there was literally a roster and the team's records. And that was it. I didn't have schedules, results, stats, box scores, nothing. I was calling the game on radio, which made it easier, but still, you have to learn to search in every single crevice that you can find to figure out what is a productive thing to talk about with regards to the game. But a crazy one I think that was is actually probably still my favorite game ever that I've called is when I was in college. Santa Clara was playing at St. Mary's, and it was packed because it always is with the Gales. And we hadn't won up there since 2014. It was something like let's see, I think it was like an 11 game losing streak to the Gales and 5 straight up there in Moraga. And they ended up pulling off the upset. And I was actually listening to this call a couple weeks ago because someone asked me, like, hey, do you still have that? And I said, yeah, I think so. And sure enough, on an old hard drive, I still have the audio from that day. And that was the most fun that I had during a game in college because Santa Clara won and it was thrilling and they silenced the crowd. But it was also challenging because, frankly, going into that game, Patrick, we didn't expect to win. Like, we were just saying, oh, it's another opportunity to call a game. Well, all of a sudden, they're in it. And all of a sudden, I'm realizing, wait a minute, this is a huge moment and I've got to be able to nail this call. And I still to this day feel mostly good about what I said and how I portrayed the final, 90 seconds or so. It was electric. The crowd was incredible. It was about a month or no, 2 months before the world shut down because of COVID that year. So, place was packed and it was January 2020 and it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. The one thing I didn't like about that was um, I said, Trey, driving down the lane, layup is up, no good. I hate the phrase no good. If you're on radio, don't say no good. Don't ever, there's no reason, don't do it. On TV, it can be okay because we see how it misses. But when you see a miss on radio, tell me how it missed. And he, put it up with his right hand and missed on the underside of the iron. I didn't say either of those things. I got the key information, which is he didn't make it. Frankic the rebound. He can't get the putback rebound again, and he scores. Josip Frankic scores. It's a 1 point Santa Clara lead. That I didn't say it like that, but those are the exact words that I used, and I didn't need to listen to that a couple weeks ago to remember because I listened to it a lot back in college. But realizing what was happening in that moment and how important it was for me to have a good call, I thought about that frequently during the game. Like, holy crap, we might actually do that. They might pull this off. And now I don't think I would have that same sort of, I'd consider that a negative thought, frankly, because it's almost like, oh, don't screw it up. Don't screw it. I'll be good. Being in the moment and just immersing yourself there, that was the first opportunity I really had for that, where it was paid off with a win. And I did well. I did very well. It was not perfect, but that was definitely a challenge in some ways. But my color analyst was my friend since I was 12 years old, and he knows and appreciates very much the difference between play-by-play and color. And so he was not stepping on my toes. He knew exactly when to come in and let me have that. So that was really great. One of my favorite broadcasting memories ever.
Nice. And that almost reminded me of a time I called Miami and Florida State with Matthew Cleveland hitting a buzzer beater. That was like probably, I remember feeling exactly like you just described with everything going on, like basically feeling it throughout entire body. Like I just gotta
Yeah.
love this moment. But my last question is, what things are you looking to kind of build this year as we just started really with 2025? And then plus, are you considering jumping into, I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but any kind of summer broadcasting job or baseball in that sense?
Well, I love golf a lot, so it's kind of hard to turn down the summer off from play-by-play. Um, I would say no on that front right now, because I do value having that time off. Because I mean, in football season, man, I'm doing 6 podcasts a week. I'm calling football and soccer and volleyball games, traveling all the time. Like it's just a lot. And so it is nice to have kind of that easier time. But I'm also, at the Division 1 level right now. Whereas if I weren't, I'd probably have a different vantage point on that. But certainly I'm always seeking new opportunities. That's something you should always be pursuing. But what I gain a lot, given kind of the desire and groundwork I've laid to pursue play-by-play at the college level, would I gain a lot from going out and trying to call games for a wood bat league? Probably not. I don't think, just because that's not where my play-by-play desires lie. Um, so I don't think that. And then what was the first question?
Was basically just what kind of things are you trying to build and look see
Oh, yeah.
yourself maybe doing.
Yeah, I mean, I have goals for, viewership and subscriptions on both my podcasts that I laid out with my boss earlier this year, and I feel like we're going to be able to hit those if I continue, along the trajectory that I've had for the last couple of years. But I have to, not get complacent. And I think that's kind of a big thing for me this year is like this is going to be my third full year with Locked On where I've been doing both. Well, I guess technically fourth. Um, like it started April 2022. So, over coming up on 3 years in April of doing two Locked On shows 5 days a week all year round. And this is my fourth season with Southern Utah is to be appreciative of both those roles because they're both incredible opportunities, but to also keep that mindset of keep getting better, keep growing. How can I improve this? How can I be better here? I've been trying to work on my basketball vocabulary a lot over the last couple of weeks. I jot down anywhere from 4 to 6 terms for a variety of areas that I try to work in that I want to just have be a natural part of my vocab that I don't have to think about. So like that's something that I'm constantly doing. Or with my podcast, how can I have better segments? How can I have better cold opens? How can I have better transitions to ad breaks that maximize the value for our sponsors? Those are the sorts of things that, going back to that discussion that we were having earlier, constant improvement, whether that's play by play, podcast, like whatever, just keep getting better. And if you do that and work hard, eventually I think someone will notice what you're doing.
For sure. Well, I mean, Spencer, it was a pleasure to have you on, and I love all the advice and the stories and everything else that you basically talked about. And it's something that I think is definitely going to impact a lot of people and be useful. So thank you so much for taking the time. Look forward to keeping in touch and definitely wish you all the best and continue to grow, as you mentioned, and just get better and better.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Great to be on. Keep working hard.
All right. Thank you so much, Spencer. I'll talk soon.